My name is Lily Harris, and I'm 39 years old. 22 years ago, my parents kicked me out when I was only 17 because I was pregnant. They called me a failure, saying I had ruined the life of the entire family. They didn't just tear apart all my hopes, but they slammed the door in my face. "You're no longer our daughter," my dad said, while my mom remained silent, coldly turning away as if I had never existed. That night, I had nothing but a small bag and a broken heart. I wandered the streets in the cold of Texas, not knowing where to go or what to do. But I made a promise to myself I would never go back, and I would make them pay. 22 years later, after I had rebuilt my life, my parents showed up again, this time not as loving parents, but as strangers who wanted to reclaim what they had abandoned. They knocked on my door in Austin, and with just one sentence, "Let us meet our grandchild, the grandchild we've never met." They thought I would fall into that trap of fake love. I opened the door. I looked at them without a hint of emotion and said, "My child, which one?" Their eyes widened in shock. That response was the revenge I had spent 22 years preparing for. Now I was going to show them one thing: they had no place in my life anymore. If you think this story is worth following, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe so you won't miss the upcoming episodes. Share your thoughts in the comments below. The days after being kicked out of my house, I lived like a ghost, wandering everywhere with nowhere to call home. My parents had created a wound too deep, and no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't erase it. They stole my youth, and just when I needed them the most, they abandoned me, like I was something of no value. But what I didn't know was that the pain had created a fire inside me, a fire that would never go out, always smoldering, waiting for the day it could burn fiercely. That night, when I stepped out of the door of my family, I left everything behind. But I also carried with me the only thing that could help me stand tall: hatred. My father's words, "You are no longer our daughter," echoed in my head non-stop. My mother just turned away silently without a word. I couldn't understand why they treated me this way, but I knew if I could, I would make them pay. Only a month later, I had to find a way to survive on my own. I had no one by my side, no money, no home, but I had a strong resolve, not only to survive, but to prove to them that I could succeed without their help. That was when I realized that life wasn't just about existing, it was a relentless fight. After a long time struggling, I met Maggie Collins, a 70-year-old widow who saved me from loneliness and pain. One early morning, when I was curled up on a park bench, Maggie stopped, looked at me with a sympathetic gaze. "What are you doing here, dear?" she asked. "I'm fine, just a little tired," I replied. But she saw right through me. No one could see me like she did. "You need help, dear," she said, and then took me to her home. She didn't just give me a roof over my head, she also showed me how to stand up. Maggie was the first person to teach me that life wasn't just about surviving, it was about building. "Be strong, Lily. Build a life for yourself so that one day they will have to look at you and realize they were wrong," she said. Those words weren't just comforting, but also a strategy. And from that moment, I began learning how to live more intelligently, how to never be crushed by the past. She helped me get my first job at a small hotel in Austin. Starting as a waitress, I began learning about management, finance, and business. Every day I worked harder, not only to make a living, but also to prepare for the days ahead. Maggie wasn't just someone who helped me. She was my teacher, my mentor, and the only one who believed in me during that time. But I knew I still needed to do something to get back at those who had betrayed me. And while working at the hotel, I began building relationships with people who would help me achieve that goal. Especially Michael, a young lawyer I met through a friend of Maggie's. Michael was not only good at law, but he also had connections that could help me when the time came. All these things, step by step, I had prepared for a powerful plan of revenge, not just to retaliate, but to show them how I had overcome them. After a long time living a life full of hardship, I began looking for ways to rebuild my life. I knew I needed a clear goal, something that could make my parents regret what they had done to me. But I couldn't do it alone. I needed help. Someone who could be my heir. Someone who could help me achieve what I had dreamed of all these years. And then I met Max. Max Evans wasn't an extraordinary child from the start. He was just an orphan like I once was. But there was something special about him. Max had an innate ability in technology. At first, he was just an intelligent child, but not long after I noticed that he could do things that children his age usually couldn't. He had developed software and applications with features that even adults couldn't imagine. I adopted Max when he was just a little orphan with no one else but me. And I didn't just nurture him physically, but also prepared him for a life full of potential. I began teaching Max about technology programming and the secrets of the digital world. He learned very quickly, and I knew that one day, Max would become someone influential. He would be the key to my revenge plan, and I would use his talent as a powerful tool to make my parents regret their actions. Together with Max, I began building our own tech projects. One of them was an improved software for the hotel industry, an invention that I was sure would create a storm in the very industry my parents were still running. I didn't just want to take them down for revenge. I also wanted to create something they could never control, something they would never think of my success and influence in a field they had once looked down upon. Max, with his talent, helped me do that. The boy became an integral part of this plan. We began charting out small steps one by one, so that one day we could rise up and make my parents bow down to the revenge I had carefully prepared. But I knew that to achieve this goal we would have to play a long game, and every move had to be calculated carefully. Max wasn't just my adopted son, he was my companion, the key that would help me achieve the goal I had been nurturing for many years. I would not let those who had abandoned me easily come back and take what I had built. I had prepared everything, and Max was the one who could bring me the final victory. After many years of silence and building a new life, I never expected them to come back. Yes, it was my parents, the ones who had abandoned me and rejected me when I was pregnant at 17. They didn't just cut off all contact, they pushed me out like I was a useless object. But now, here they were, standing at my doorstep, knocking as if everything had been forgotten. They didn't come looking for me out of love, but for their own benefit. They had heard about Max, about my success, and the achievements I had made in the tech industry. When I started to see Max's growth and the projects we were building, I didn't think their return would come so soon. But as soon as they heard the rumors about Max, they couldn't sit still. My parents, who had always valued power and reputation, now wanted to own a part of my life. They didn't come for love. They came because they wanted to claim what I had built, especially Max. What they needed wasn't a grandchild to love, but the rights to the successes I had achieved. They came, knocked on my door, and said, "Let us meet the child, our grandchild, that we've never had the chance to meet." But I knew their true intentions. They thought that after everything that had happened, they could simply show up, emphasize the word family, and everything would go back to the way it was. They thought I would forget the past and accept them back with a smile and open arms. But I am not someone who is easily deceived. When they stood there looking at me with eyes full of hope, I opened the door with no emotion. "My child." "Which one?" I said, my voice unwavering. That wasn't just a question, it was a warning. They never expected that I had built an entirely new life, a life in which they had no right to participate. The shock in their eyes, the confusion when they heard my response, was the moment I had been waiting for all these 22 years. Their words, the same words they used when I was just a young lost girl with no hope, no longer had the power to hurt me. They thought they could come back, join in my game, but they were wrong. They couldn't easily step into my life because they didn't realize that I had built something far stronger. I not only stood firm in a world without them, but I also became strong, independent, and in control. They thought their return would change everything, but the truth was, I had changed and was ready for whatever they would have to face. When my parents appeared at my doorstep, I immediately knew they didn't come out of love, but for their own selfish calculations. They didn't care about the hurt they had caused me over the years. They didn't come to apologize. They simply wanted to seize what I had built. But I was ready for this moment. Every step I had taken up until now had led to one goal: to take revenge in a smart, decisive, and uncompromising way. And I knew exactly what I had to do. After they left, I began implementing the first steps of the plan. First, I asked Michael, my lawyer, to start looking into all the documents related to my family, especially the business transactions my parents were still involved in. I knew they would never pass up the opportunity to claim the inheritance from Max, and I couldn't let that happen. Over the years, I had worked hard to keep everything secret. I left no traces that they could follow. However, now that they had returned with clear plans, I couldn't let them easily achieve their goals. I began collecting information on their weaknesses, from business contracts to financial agreements they had signed throughout their careers. Michael and I teamed up with Shannon, an IT expert I had met through a friend of Maggie's. Shannon was a genius at tracking digital footprints and managing data. She not only helped me track financial transactions, but also assisted me in monitoring every move my parents made online, especially searches related to Max and any inheritance claims they might try to make. At the same time, I started dropping rumors about Max into the tech community in Austin. Stories about the software and apps Max was developing quickly spread. Details about Max's talents and inventions were shared on tech websites, where people in the industry, especially my parents, would easily come across them. I knew my parents wouldn't be able to sit still when they heard about Max's outstanding success. They wouldn't be able to resist the temptation. Around this time, I decided to send them a fake letter. The letter's content was quite simple, but it contained a great deal of power. I would invite them to a meeting to discuss matters related to Max. I made them believe that I was wavering and might be convinced. I knew that if I let them think I was weak, they would be more likely to proceed with the next steps of their plan. But in reality, I was leading them into a much bigger trap, one from which they wouldn't be able to escape. I wasn't just rebuilding my life. I was building a perfect revenge plan step by step, so that one day they would realize that I wasn't the weak girl they had abandoned. They wouldn't be able to take what I had built. And more importantly, they would pay for everything they had done to me. Everything was going according to plan. I had taken small but steady steps, and now my plan was beginning to bear fruit. My parents had no idea that every move they made was under my control. To them, I was still the weak girl searching for a way to forgive the past. But in reality, I had been planning this for a long time, and they were slowly making mistakes that I was ready to exploit. After sending them the invitation to meet, I continued making them believe I was weak and could be convinced. I created an image of myself as a single mother, ready to forgive everything in order to reunite with my family. But this deception was a key element in my plan. I didn't let them realize that I was watching every move they made and that every word they spoke would become a weapon in my hands. The first mistakes began to appear when my parents started trying to infiltrate Max's life. They began looking for family lawyers and researching inheritance rights. One of the things they did was search for information about Max's inheritance rights on legal websites, and I couldn't let them easily access that information. Shannon and I began tracking every move they made online. She used monitoring tools to track my parents' searches, and discovered that they had visited websites about inheritance and the rights of grandparents to their grandchildren. This was the clearest sign that they weren't coming to reunite as a family. They only wanted to claim ownership of Max, something they thought they had the right to demand. This was the moment I began setting the trap. I had prepared a fake contract, a document that appeared legal, but in reality was a political game designed to force them to expose their mistakes. I let them believe that I genuinely wanted to cooperate, that I had changed and was aiming for a happy life with my family. The fake contract was presented as a reasonable agreement for them to gain access to Max, but in fact it was filled with loopholes that I could use to trap them. At the same time, I started leaking small rumors about the investigations my parents were conducting to claim Max's inheritance rights. Stories about their greed and their covert plans began circulating within the business communities in Austin. I knew they wouldn't be able to control this information for long, and the more they reacted, the clearer their failure would become. These mistakes brought me closer to my goal. I had made my parents make mistakes they couldn't undo. They didn't realize that I was setting traps around them, and the more aggressively they acted, the more evidence and confidence I gained in the ultimate victory. The feeling of controlling the entire situation, knowing they were falling into the trap I had set for them, was truly satisfying. But I knew there was one more important step. They didn't know that their mistakes would lead to an inevitable collapse. And when that time came, everything would be exposed for all to see, and they would have to pay for what they had done to me. Everything had been meticulously prepared. I had waited for this moment for 22 years, and now I felt that it was only a matter of time. My plan had entered its final stage, where I would make my parents pay for everything they had done to me. They thought they could easily come back and take everything I had built, but they had no idea that I had built a solid wall unbreakable. With all the fake documents, investigations into them, and the mistakes they had made, I decided it was time to end this game, once and for all. I organized a major tech event in Austin, an event not only to introduce Max, but also to give my parents a chance to face the truth and the lies they had built. On that day, Max stood on stage at the Austin Tech Summit with bright lights shining down on him. The boy, no longer a child but a true genius, was about to change the tech industry. Max began speaking about the software project he had created and how it could revolutionize the way the hotel industry operated. And right there, I decided to let everyone know the real story, that Max wasn't my biological grandchild but my adopted son. As Max spoke about the development of the software, a large screen behind him began playing a video that I had prepared. The video was a message from Maggie, the woman who had helped me through the toughest times. Maggie wasn't just the person who saved me when I was at my lowest. She was also the first person to show me how to rebuild my life and take intelligent revenge. In the video, Maggie clearly stated, "Family is not always the people who stand by you, but those who love and protect you when you have nothing." As the video ended, I stepped onto the stage facing my parents, who were sitting in the front row with rigid faces and eyes full of scheming. I wasn't scared. On the contrary, I felt like I was standing at a decisive moment where I would expose everything they had done over the past 22 years. "My parents abandoned me when I was pregnant," I said, my voice resonating. "They kicked me out, not caring about how I had to survive on the streets. And now, after all these years, they've come back, not because of love, but for their own benefit." The room fell silent. I looked into their eyes, feeling their shock and worry. I didn't just expose their greed. I also revealed to everyone the agreements they had signed, the mistakes they made in trying to take the inheritance and benefits from Max. And then I played my trump card. The emails, the recorded calls, all the evidence showing they had discussed with lawyers and tried to seize Max's inheritance rights was displayed on the big screen. Everyone in the room could clearly see that my parents had been planning for a long time to steal Max's wealth and success. As those videos and documents played, I saw the change in my parents' faces. They were no longer the people I feared. They were now just losers, the ones I had brought down in front of the public. And the inevitable ending came. Sean, my lawyer, stepped onto the stage holding a stack of documents and announced that he had all the evidence to protect me. "Your parents, Patrick and Andrea, along with Derek, signed a contract 22 years ago, officially relinquishing all rights related to Chelsea Norton and any children she may have had." Sean's voice was cold, as though everything had ended. My parents, after everything they had done, could only stand there stunned as the truth was fully exposed before everyone's eyes. And then in a brief moment, I felt like I had won. Not just a personal victory, but my victory. As a woman who had been abandoned, now standing strong and not letting anyone hurt me again. When Sean displayed the documents, emails, and recorded calls on the screen, I saw the complete collapse of my parents. They couldn't say a word. In those moments, I felt like a storm had swept through. All the pain they had caused me over the years was now exposed to the public eye, and all they could do was stand there pale, unable to refute anything. When Sean announced the contract from 22 years ago, where my parents had relinquished any inheritance rights and claims to me and any children I might have, I couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction. This was the result of years of suffering my hard work, the sweet revenge I had been waiting for so long. In this moment, I was no longer the weak girl who had been abandoned, but the victor. But my parents' failure didn't stop there. Videos of them and Derek, the evidence I had gathered over the time, were immediately shared on social media. People began spreading the story, and within hours it became hot news across all tech platforms. My parents' videos were being criticized by the public, and what they had done to me had now become a never-ending topic of discussion. I knew that now they had not only lost their reputation, but also lost everything they had built throughout their lives. Their company, important contracts, everything was destroyed in just one night. Their business partners began pulling out, no longer wanting to be associated with a family that exhibited such unethical behavior. My parents were not just boycotted by the public, but also by those who had once trusted them. Derek, who had been a key part of their plan, didn't escape his fate either. The emails and conversations between him and my parents were exposed, showing clearly that he had been exploiting Max's success for his own gain. And now he too was under investigation. Evidence of Derek's tax evasion was passed on to the tax authorities, leading to a major investigation. Although I didn't directly do this, I knew that his downfall was the result of the mistakes he had made. In the end, I saw my parents and Derek being removed from my life forever. They were erased not only financially, but also socially. No one trusted them anymore, no one wanted to work with them, and I, the one who had been abandoned by them all those years ago, now had an entirely different life, one that they no longer had any power to affect. After everything ended, I stood there beside Max with the sweet feeling of victory. Max had become an important part of my life. The boy was not just my adopted son, but also the one who helped me find my strength and purpose. He became a testament to what I had overcome, and also the reason I would never return to that past. But my victory didn't stop there. I continued my work, developed new projects, and built a strong future. I not only rebuilt my life, but I also helped those like me, those who had been abandoned and betrayed. And an important part of that was creating a charity for single mothers, helping them to have the opportunity to overcome the hardships in life just as I had done. With each passing day, I felt happier and more at peace. I had taken revenge, but not by returning the harm done to me. I took revenge by living better, stronger, and proving that no one could control me. And I also knew that after everything that had happened, my parents and Derek would never be able to get back what they had lost. After everything that had happened, my life was no longer a series of struggles and running away. I had completely ended everything related to that painful past. The people who had abandoned me could no longer affect me. My parents had failed miserably, and I had proven to them that even though they had given up on me, I could rise above, overcome all challenges, and build a better life. My new life is now a busy one, filled with tech development projects, with my company growing stronger and more successful each day. Max, the son I adopted, is not only my greatest motivation, but also a testament to relentless effort and determination. Max has become a young founder, an influential figure in the tech industry, and I am proud to watch him grow stronger under my guidance. Since I decided to start the Lily Foundation to support single mothers, those who had been abandoned and faced difficulties in life, I realized that I wasn't just helping myself, but also many others. This foundation has helped hundreds of mothers have a second chance in life, providing them with housing, employment, and financial support to overcome hardships. I feel happiness and fulfillment when I see their smiles, because I know I've done something truly meaningful. I continue to build tech projects with Max, and step by step we have created revolutionary software that helps change both the hotel industry and tech services. With each success, each new product developed, I feel the freedom and power I have spent my whole life seeking. Meanwhile, my parents still couldn't recover from the massive shock I had caused. Their company went bankrupt. All the major contracts they once had were canceled. Important business relationships began to turn away from them. They were blacklisted in the business world and could not restore the reputation they had lost. To me, this was the price they had to pay for what they had done to me. Not only had they lost their power, but they also lost their ability to exist in the society they had once dominated. As for Derek, he faced severe consequences for his tax evasion. After his secret bank accounts and shady transactions were exposed, the tax authorities called for a full investigation. Derek couldn't escape the heavy penalties and lost everything he had built. But I didn't feel sorry. I knew he had created misery for me for years, and now it was time for him to pay. As for me, I was no longer the woman of the past. I was no longer the girl abandoned in the dark. I was a mother, a founder, and a strong woman. I had rebuilt my life from scratch and achieved successes that no one could have imagined. And most importantly, I had found myself again stronger and more confident than ever. Max and I continued on the path ahead together. The boy, now grown, was pursuing his own dream in the tech world. I will always be by his side, but I also know that Max will not only be my son, but also an influential person who will change the world in the way he wants. And I will always be the first to support him. For me, victory is not about revenge or satisfaction. It is simply about proving that no matter how life beats you down and abandons you, you can still rise and move forward, rebuilding your own life. The dark days are over, and now I live the life I deserve.